Hello, I hope you're well. And if you've been following along, welcome back. This is episode 43, if you can believe that. And if this is a one-off for you, welcome. Yeah, thanks so much for listening. And I hope that you find something of value in what I'm doing here, either today or generally speaking. I hope that it helps you in how you experience this ride, this precious life. And I am reading on the book. I am reading On the Path, an anthology on the Noble Eightfold Path, drawn from the Pāli Canon. And I did not write this book. This is a book that was written back in 2017-ish by Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu, who is an American Buddhist monk. And he's widely respected for his translations of Buddhist texts and his teachings on meditation and the Dhamma. And his work is deeply rooted in the Theravāda Buddhist tradition, emphasizing a direct and practical approach to the Buddha's teachings. And I always like to just briefly say, hey, thank you so much, Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu, for putting your book in the Creative Commons so that I can make a podcast like this and bring an audio component to it so that, people who would like to listen to what you've done here, this beautiful book here, they can experience it. So thank you for that. And the book is free, so thank you for that. So if you visit the description here, you'll see a link to the free book. Let's get going, right? Let's get going. We are still in Right View, Chapter 3. Been on Right View for a good 36, 37 episodes perhaps. So a really rich and foundational chapter. If you have familiarity with Buddhism, then you're probably familiar with the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths reside canonically in Right View. So in other words, Right View, maybe if you don't like the word right, sounds a little presumptuous, doesn't it? Maybe we'll say Buddhist view. The Four Noble Truths live there. And it's, I've heard teachers, back when I was much more active in community, Sangha, that kind of community. And I continue to hear Buddhist teachers, monks, and nuns talk about the importance of seeing Right View for yourself before that it would perhaps help you, assist you in working with the other quote-unquote rights, the other 7. That was certainly true for me because how I came to that produced earnestness in me to a fault. For those of you who know me, maybe I'm in your life. I'm very, very earnest, but it also makes me very committed, very disciplined. So double-edged sword there. Anyway, I don't want to get off on the train already. Haven't even got into this, but yeah, so that's what we are. That's what we're doing right now in the book is we're still in Right View, which constitutes more than half of this book. So I think that there's probably, that says a lot about the importance of Right View on the Eightfold Path as well. All right. So if you're following along in the PDF, then I'm picking up on the bottom of page 222. And I have to assume that all of what we're about to do here all comes from one sutta. And I say that because it begins with the subheading, Dependent Co-arising. And we're now going to get into quite a bit of text here, several pages, I would say, that all fall under the Sutta 130, says Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu. And he doesn't really kind of, sign off with the exact location in sutta for several pages. And so this is pretty cool. Again, I've never had this much direct exposure, or I should say I haven't had this much direct exposure to the suttas in over 20 years. And so I'm really enjoying this. Yeah, this is really nice. So let's see here. Sutta 130. Venerable Sariputta said, quote, Right view, it is said. To what extent is a disciple of the noble ones a person of right view? One whose view is made straight, one who is endowed with verified confidence in the Dhamma, and who has arrived at this true Dhamma. This is capitalized here, the way one might capitalize the word God. We would come from a long distance, friend, to learn the meaning of these words in Venerable Sariputta's presence. It would be good if Venerable Sariputta himself would enlighten us as to their meaning. Having listened to him, the monks will bear it in mind. Then in that case, friends, listen and pay close attention. I will speak. As you say, friend. The monks responded to him. All right, and so we kick off dependent co-arising with a request from a student that paves the way for a discourse. So Venerable Sariputta takes on that request, and he begins with skillful and unskillful. Venerable Sariputta said, when a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns what is unskillful, discerns the root of what is unskillful, discerns what is skillful, and discerns the root of what is skillful, it is to that extent that he is a person of right view, one whose view is made straight, who is endowed with verified confidence in the Dhamma, and who has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is unskillful? Taking life as unskillful, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle chatter is unskillful, covetousness, ill will, wrong views are unskillful. These things are called unskillful. And what are the roots of what is unskillful? Greed is a root of what is unskillful. Aversion is a root of what is unskillful. Delusion is a root of what is unskillful. These are called the roots of what is unskillful. And what is skillful? Abstaining from taking life is skillful. Abstaining from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from lying, from divisive speech, harsh speech. Abstaining from idle chatter is skillful. Lack of covetousness, lack of ill will. Right views are skillful. These things are called skillful. When a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns what is unskillful in this way, discerns the root of what is unskillful in this way, discerns what is skillful in this way, and discerns the root of what is skillful in this way, when, having entirely abandoned passion obsession, having abolished aversion obsession, having uprooted the view and conceit obsession, I am, having abandoned ignorance and given rise to clear knowing, he has put an end to suffering and stress right in the here and now. It is to this extent that a disciple of the Noble Ones is a person of right view, one whose view is made straight, one who is endowed with verified confidence in the Dhamma, and who has arrived at the true Dhamma. And so that's what Venerable Sariputta had to say about skillful and unskillful in relationship to right view. And, when I read sections like this, I do appreciate how it can feel like rules, commandments. I realize not everybody, finds the word commandment to be a Shempa point, but if you do, then I could see how this might savor. To my view, my understanding, is that all that's really being acknowledged or talked about here, discussed here, is what skillful and unskillful is in right view in this particular path. And I feel the need to convey that here because I think oftentimes when we don't measure up to these rights, skillful and unskillful, right? Going back and looking at all of these, greed is the root, right? Aversion is the root. Delusion is the root, right? It can feel very, or at least I should say that if you've got a past with that, it might savor of that. I'll just say how I work with these. I really do take the words skillful and unskillful very seriously. In other words, there's beating myself up, flagellating myself, kicking the shit out of myself is not skillful. Why do I find that internal monologue unskillful for me in my life because it's redirecting my attention away from skillful means, from skillful thoughts, from skillful actions, from skillful practices, from skillful actions, from skillful actions, from skillful actions. I could probably say that 1,000 times. Kamma, Dhamma is action in Buddhism. It's action. And maybe it is another, again, I'm very, very ignorant. Again, if you're brand new to this episode, the whole thing, the whole gestalt here, and this is your first episode, I am a lay Buddhist. I live in Los Angeles. My exposure to Buddhism comes from Western teachers. I haven't looked at a sutta in at least, I've been reading this book for a year, but prior to that, I hadn't actually picked up a book and visited and pondered the suttas in about, 18 or 19 years. And so I am very ignorant. I'm also very devout. So you can do whatever you'd like to do with that information. But that's how I work with this idea of skillful and unskillful. And I am going to keep reading. So now we're getting to another section here. And apparently we're still in the same conversation here. And Venerable Sariputta is still advising his students who made that request, saying, "Good friend, having delighted in and approved of Venerable Sariputta's words, the monks asked him a further question. Would there be another line of reasoning by which a disciple of the Noble Ones is a person of right view who has arrived at this true Dhamma? There would. When a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns nutriment, the origination of nutriment, the cessation of nutriment, and the way of practice leading to the cessation of nutriment, then he is a person of a right view who has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is nutriment? What is the origination of nutriment? What is the cessation of nutriment? What is the way of practice leading to the cessation of nutriment? There are these 4 nutriments for the maintenance of beings who have come to be, or for the support of those in search of a place to be born. Which 4? Physical food, gross or refined, contact as the 2nd, intellectual intention the 3rd, and consciousness the 4th. From the origination of craving comes the origination of nutriment. From the cessation of craving comes the cessation of nutriment. And the way of practice leading to the cessation of nutriment is just this very Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. So I know that this book has talked about this idea before. Nutriment or nourishment, and what that means in the context of Buddhist psychology. So per the usual, I asked AI to help me a little bit with the origins of this idea in the canon. And if robot is correct, it says that it comes from the Samyutta Nikaya, or the Sun's Flesh Sutta. Ooh, part of the Buddhist teachings on dependent origination. And this is great. The student is asking, hey, is there some other way to understand right view, to be able to connect with it, to access the idea. And in my understanding, and he's saying, yeah, you can think of it as nourishment, and how there are different aspects of a human being's manifestation experience. They exist, these aspects, and how we attend to them or fail to attend to them matters. It has a role to play in outcomes. This is my understanding, bear in mind. So yeah, we have physical food. And I think, in and of itself, physical food is complex. As I've mentioned before in this podcast, I struggled with bulimia nervosa for, a very, very, very long time. And that's an interesting illness to look into. It's pretty out there. So even our relationship to physical food is complicated. And also, we're beginning to understand, some have understood for a long time, that what's going on in our gut matters. And how we nourish ourselves matter. It has a role to play in our experience here as well. So physical food. But that's only one kind of nourishment from Buddha's view here. There's also contact with other humans, contact with other beings, contact with places, contact with ideas, contact with storylines. So we, as humans, we experience something with our senses, perhaps one, perhaps all, perhaps some, and that therein produces a feeling. And perhaps you can relate to this idea. And I think that this is, to my understanding, this is, or I'll just say I'm going to guess, but maybe this is written somewhere, that this is why Zen is so appreciative of art and getting access to art, getting to experience art from a very young age, engaging in your own artistic endeavors, creativity, but also appreciating art. Because art and its manifestation, if we connect with it, it can really be quite a profound experience. And, maybe you've never had an experience that was quite emotional vis-a-vis art. And I would just say maybe not yet. Maybe you just haven't found the thing. Or maybe it's not art at all. I don't know. I don't want to get off on a tangent here because we're focusing on contact. But let me just tie it back to there is certain music. I think it's Debussy. I don't know. Clair de Lune. Very common song. When I hear that song, more often than not, I get emotional. Sometimes I cry. When I listen to bossa nova music, even though I'm Western European, white woman who's lived in Los Angeles or some state in the US my whole life, that music makes me feel very emotional. It's hard to put a finger on it. And I won't have realized it until the song has come on, and suddenly I'll have a really good cry and realize, wow, I really needed that, Anyway, you may or may not relate to this. I don't know who's listening to this and et cetera, how you operate, but contact, our sensory experience, our sensory media makes contact, and that contact produces feeling. So another nutriment is intention or volition, and I think that this really is the key aspect of the action of Buddhism, which to my mind it's very much an action. Buddhism is kind of the Dharma, whatever the Dhamma. It's kind of a participatory engagement, kind of a decision. It's not like it's not anyway. I don't want to go off the rails again. I'll just say, hey, our intention matters, and it's really critical to our nourishment because we recognize that we are nourished through six sense media. Then we do want to practice discernment, and so therein comes volition or intention. So mental formations. So we can't work with our mental formations if we don't know that we have mental formations. We might be able to recognize in a kind of academic way that we have mental formations. You're like, yeah, well, I'm alive. I've managed to feed myself, bathe myself, and clothe myself and my family, my children, or whatever your situation is. So, obviously, one might say to themselves, right, I know that I can form mental ideas, or I would have died a long time ago. But mental formations here, in relationship to intention here, is really, really subtle. And I think it's why it within, the Eightfold Path, it's why you have right concentration. It's why you have right mindfulness. It's why you have right effort. To my mind, those need to be cultivated to kind of get at this right here, this particular kind of nutriment, mental formations. So to be able to know what mental formations we are kind of operating on or by, we need to actually know that they exist, that they're there. And this is why, to my view, as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of therapy. I'm not in therapy now, and I don't know that I will do therapy again. I was in therapy for, off and on for a good 2 decades, and I found it very, very helpful. And for me, it was very, very helpful because it coupled with a Buddhist practice for me, helped me to, I guess you could say, cultivate for inner courage for me to examine any of the mental formations in any real way that were maybe I wasn't always fully consciously aware of. We can't know what we don't know, and if we did, we wouldn't be doing what we were doing. If we're behaving in a particular way, or we're getting results in our life that really weren't results that we wanted, at a certain point, to my view, Buddhism really comes down to N equals 1. It's really recognizing that we are producing that physical food, contact, and intention, the mental formations that are forming in our mind, that this is what is experiencing the cycle or creating the cycle, the feedback loop, if you will. What's great is that we have free will, but we don't have free will. But to my view, to my understanding of Buddhism, it's more about recognizing that whatever the conditions are in our life, understanding where they came from and is very helpful and central, but also on a certain level, it becomes irrelevant. Or it doesn't become irrelevant, but it can become a tool, a mechanism by which we can go deeper, to go underneath it, underneath the conditions, below the conditions, to the thing beneath the thing beneath the thing. I don't even know if any of this is making sense, but this idea of contact, in other words, the ideas, the thoughts that arise in the mind, is a really, 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 really important aspect of Buddhism, working with it every single day. It's certainly why I meditate every day, among other reasons, but it's one of the key core reasons why I meditate every day, is this idea of intention or volition, working with the mind. And so then the fourth, is consciousness itself, awareness. How aware are we? And awareness feeds the awareness of this whole gestalt here, just feeds the loop. It feeds the loop by planting itself in name and form. So anyway, I want to keep on reading, but yeah, nutriment, really fascinating stuff here in terms of how the Buddha saw this idea and how kind of nuanced he held it to be. Okay, so next up on the bottom of page 224, if you're following along in the PDF, stress. When a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns stress, the origination of stress, the cessation of stress, and the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress, then he is a person of right view, who has arrived at the true Dhamma. And what is stress? Birth is stressful. Aging is stressful. Death is stressful. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are stressful. Association with the unbeloved is stressful. Separation from the loved is stressful. Not getting what one wants is stressful. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are stressful. This is called stress. What is the origination of stress? The craving that makes for further becoming, accompanied by passion and delight. Relishing now here and now there, i.e. craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming. This is called the origination of stress. And what is the cessation of stress? The remainderless dispassioning and cessation, renunciation, relinquishment, release, and letting go of that very craving. This is called the cessation of stress. And what is the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress? Just this very Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. I'm sure we can all relate to experiencing stress in our life. And I know if I'm honest with myself and I really contemplate what produces the stressors in my life, I can see for myself that it always comes back to these here. So I'll kind of hit these again. What is stress? Well, yeah, birth is stressful. I think we all kind of can recognize that, right? It's stressful for the baby. It's stressful for the mother. It's stressful for the family. If you're young, you may not recognize this yet, but guaranteed, if you're older, I'm in my early 50s now, and as you age and as you watch the body change, the body begins to sag, starts to lose its elasticity. And of course, we can also care for the body, and I'm a big, big, big advocate of caring for the body. I was a competitive athlete for, oh my goodness, most of my adult life. And now I do other things to support the stage that I'm in my life. But as you age, we start to notice, and our relationship to that noticing can produce an inordinate amount of stress, or it can produce very little, depending on our volition and intention, our mental fabrication, right? Our relationship to the process of getting older. And of course, death is stressful. We fear it. Some of us fear it so much that it drives our life. It is the narrative through line of a life. It's incredibly stressful and painful to lose someone that we love. And this is really interesting, and I think really worth kind of staying with for a moment. Association with the unbeloved is stressful. I think that this can be a really big sticking point for most humans when we're not being kind. Anyway, I don't want to get really meandery here again. I'll just say that if you're listening, you may or may not have people in your life that you consider to be unbeloved. Now, I am not a scholar, and so I don't quite know what is meant here by unbeloved exactly. What I'm assuming that it means, what I believe that it means, is there are people in our life that we don't feel love towards. For some people listening, perhaps you actually experience hatred, and that causes a significant amount of stress in our life. There are absolutely, I don't experience hatred, but there are definitely people in my life that are not, don't feel beloved. And this does produce stress. It produces stress in me. That relationship that I have with the unbeloved produces stress in me. Well, I want to keep on going, but yeah, so stress. And this is great. Now, once again, I wanted to use a little robot just because of the wording on this, which is so rich, but it's like, wow, this is so specific and so kind of, wow, involved. But listen to what the Buddha says is the thing that leads us away from, or not away from, but leads to the cessation, right? The kind of cooling off of stress. So I'll reread this for us here. It's pretty cool stuff. The remainderless dispassioning and cessation, renunciation, relinquishment, release, and letting go of that very craving. Wow. So could have just said the letting go, right? But went pretty heavy-handed in the word department. Why? I'm sure there were reasons. And so I'm gonna go and ask an AI again that's trained with in Buddhism to kind of maybe unpack this, to make sure that I'm not glossing over anything because I didn't understand it in context. So I'll be right back. Wow, this is so great. Remainderless. So here's what Robot has to say. Remainderless means there's no residue, no hidden root of desire still smoldering. So this is profound. This is profound. It's also how I know that I'm not awake. I have had moments, and I'll say too, speaking for myself, that I don't know if it was the practice or if it was just the process of aging. I don't really know. But at a certain point in my life, and I think it happened gradually, but it happened over time, is that to a certain degree, I really did experience complete ending of craving, tanha, around quote unquote making it as a writer, a producer, a musician. And I'm really grateful for that, because that was really painful. I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm not at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm trying to call on something that just really created a lot of pain for me. And I think the reason why it did take up so much of my mental time and space is because of how much I think my identity was kind of tied up in that. I'm an artist, and at this point in my life, I'm not really entirely sure what that means anymore. I'm an artist. I think humans are creative. I think that some of us have had opportunities to play in it. For me, as I've mentioned in earlier episodes, not only was I in choir, and not only was that choir, a Shangri-La, a lake in a stark desert. It was a place for me to go to feel safe. So I had exposure to art and writing. I was, encouraged, by my family, was told frequently as a young, I got published very young, and, was told frequently by my family, was praised. I was encouraged to keep writing, keep singing, never discouraged. And I feel really grateful for that. I know that for some, their creative interests are crushed, by caregivers. And anyway, I don't want to go down a long alley on that one either, but I'll just say that I have experienced that around my artistic endeavors, and it has been incredibly liberating for me. It doesn't really feel like there's any stakes. I don't feel like I have to do it to matter, to mean something. And to a certain degree, I think I've always felt that way. But, when I was in film school, because I did go to film school, and I think that was probably, there was, during that time in my life, I was really identified, with quote unquote making it, being in the quote unquote industry, which I find that expression in and of itself kind of smarmy. Well, it's not the industry, it's an industry. There's actually lots of industries, so I've always been a little bit of a, yeah. But I would actually suggest that, cooling off around all of that would probably benefit all artists out there, even if you're using your art to make a living. I would say especially if you're using your art to make a living. The last thing that, to my mind, you want to do is develop some kind of narrative that you continually feed around your relationship to your art, forming a really solid identity around it, where it's all that matters. One of the most dangerous aspects of that is that most humans seem to have put you in a really superior position in their mind. I'm not sure why. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've earned it. And that's a dangerous game if you believe them. I hope that makes sense. If you believe that somehow you're superior because you're an artist, well, you're not. Yeah, I can sing well, and I'm not superior. I as I mentioned in an earlier episode, I've been told that my maternal grandmother was an exceptional singer. Right on. I got some pretty kick-ass genes. Thank you, Grandma. At any rate, dispassion, I think sometimes with dispassion, we think it means not caring, becoming kind of like this nihilistic, dead inside. That is not at all what's going on. That is not what the Buddha meant. To my understanding, that is not what was meant by dispassion. It's right-sizing it. It's right-sizing yourself in relationship to the ball we call earth. And beyond that, right-sizing yourself, ego, self, actually will become your liberator ultimately. The more you can develop that kind of relationship with all of that, to my view, at least that's what's been my experience, the better it feels to create, the easier it is for me to get into a flow state. The more joyous it feels, the more fun. So, taking the self out of the equation entirely. I read this quote the other day. Someone said, this year I wrote this, what was it? Something like this month I wrote 100 pages and then I burned them. I actually think that's a really great practice. And I used to have practices like that back when I was writing a lot more than I do now. I used to write quite a lot. I mean, I have just ridiculous amounts of poetry and short films and all kinds of things. And then at a certain point, I kind of, I don't know, time, we can't do all the things, but I actually think it's a great idea to destroy your art, my precious. It's a really great idea to destroy it. Not because you're saying, pooh, I violate you, I spit on you, but it's more of an act of selflessness. It's an act of saying, this thing that I have, this dynamic that I have with this art, I don't understand it and it's beautiful. And I want to be as receptive as possible. And so I want to, for me, because of the whole Buddhist thing, what to me is an ultimate way of disengaging my ego from it is to destroy it. It's to destroy it. Because anything that was caught up in that, that is all part of, as Robot kind of hit on and really put a finer line on when I asked them to unpack this particular passage. It says, if there is any residue, any hidden root or smoldering. Yeah. Interesting, smoldering, right? We can watch that book of poetry that we worked on all year just go up in flames. And if you're into it, you can say, thank you, God. Thank you, life. Thank you, this. Thank you, now. Or just thank you. My personal favorite. So, all right. I'm going to keep on reading here. Yeah, keep on reading. Let's go. All right. So speaking of getting older, so the next section is called, the subheading is Aging and Death. Beginning with an ellipses. When a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns aging and death, the origination of aging and death, the cessation of aging and death, and the way of practice leading to the cessation of aging and death, then he is a person of right view, who has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is aging and death? What is the origination of aging and death? What is the cessation of aging and death? What is the way of practice leading to the cessation of aging and death? Whatever aging, decrepitude, brokenness, graying, wrinkling, decline of life force, weakening of the faculties of the various beings in this or that group of beings, that is called aging. Whatever deceasing, passing away, breaking up, disappearance, dying, death, completion of time, breakup of the aggregates, casting of the body, interruption in the life faculty of the various beings in this or that group of beings, that is called death. This aging and this death are called aging and death. From the origination of birth comes the origination of aging and death. From the cessation of birth comes the cessation of aging and death. And the way of practice leading to the cessation of aging and death is just this very Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And I'm immediately going to move right into birth before I comment, because, obviously these are connected to each other. And so I'm going to keep on going. The next subsection, birth, ellipses. When a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns birth, the origination of birth, the cessation of birth, and the way of practice leading to the cessation of birth, then he is a person of right view, who has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is birth? What is the origination of birth? What is the cessation of birth? What is the way of practice leading to the cessation of birth? Whatever birth, taking birth, descent, coming to be, coming forth, appearance of aggregates and acquisition of, in brackets, sense spheres of the various beings in this or that group of beings, that is called birth. From the origination of becoming comes the origination of birth. From the cessation of becoming comes the cessation of birth. And the way of practice leading to the cessation of birth is just this very Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And the next subsection is called becoming. So earlier it says, from the origination of becoming comes the origination of birth. And so in the next section, we'll dig into becoming, which apparently leads to birth, which apparently leads to death, and the cycle continues. But I want to unpack death, aging and death and birth a little bit with the help of a robot, so that I can maybe provide a little bit of commentary like I usually do on kind of how I approach this in my own life, as I am closer to dead than alive at this point. And so unless something radical happens in the next 30 or 40 years. So I'll be right back. Okay, here we go. So I really appreciate that robot circled back almost immediately to another phrase, apparently, another sentiment that the Buddha shared. Whatever is subject to arising is subject to cessation. So if we're born, we'll die. Words are born and they die. Our actions are born and then they dissipate. It's one can't have one without the other. They are symbiotic. They are mutually contingent upon each other. Whatever weird, I don't even know if any of that made sense. But it's inherently connected. Can't have one without the other. And then, of course, we'll get into becoming, which the Buddha says becoming, this idea of becoming, which we'll do a little unpacking on, hopefully, is what leads to birth, which leads to aging and death, which leads to put the needle on the wreck, So Buddhist psychology would say we're not just talking about physical birth, being birthed into life on planet Earth. We're not really necessarily talking about that kind of natural coming into being of birth. We're talking about the very thing we've been talking about all along. Ideas are birthed, feelings are birthed, relationships between the sense gates and those feelings and mental cognitions are birthed. So all of this is birthed. It's born, it can die, it can be born, it can die, it can be born, it can die, it can be born, it can die. So let's go back and take a look at becoming. Becoming, the process of existence actually manifesting, actually taking shape. Becoming. So yeah, let's go see what the Buddha had to say about that. Becoming. Ellipses. When a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns becoming, the origination of becoming, the cessation of becoming, and the way of practice leading to the cessation of becoming, then he is a person of right view, who has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is becoming? What is the origination of becoming? What is the cessation of becoming? What is the way of practice leading to the cessation of becoming? There are these three becomings: sensual becoming, form becoming, and formless becoming. This is called becoming. From the origination of clinging comes the origination of becoming. From the cessation of clinging comes the cessation of becoming. And the way of practice leading to the cessation of becoming is just this very Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and circle back to these three becomings that the Buddha claims exist: sensual, form, and formless. So sensual becoming. Sensual becoming, and we're gonna be talking about this idea maybe in this episode, maybe next episode. It kind of depends on what the clock looks like by the time I'm all said and done with this edit. But we will talk about sense media, or our senses. Yeah, which we talked about before, in the book, or he's talked about before in the book, or sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. There's another one that I can't get to right now in my mind. Some of us don't have access to these. Maybe other senses compensate, right? But we have, this is how we make contact with the world and with our own bodies, is through the sense gates. So sensual becoming relates to the sense gates. Its existence, our becoming, right? Our birthing, our becoming, which would lead to the birth process, the birthing of an idea, the birthing of a relationship, right, etc. It's driven, it's fueled by sensory desire, craving, wanting an experience. So we might crave a sight, crave seeing something, crave hearing something, etc., etc. Crave feeling something. We were craving mental images, fantasies, fill in the blank, mental imagery. In Buddhism, the Buddha's making a distinction. He's explaining that sensual becoming is something that humans experience in the realm of being human, in that realm, in the human realm. Here comes the cosmology, right? And apparently most animal and heavenly realms of sense pleasure. Now, again, I've talked about, my feeling on the cosmological aspects of Buddhism, which, yes, it's wholly grounded in cosmology, in the sense that it is foundational. This notion that won't use the word reincarnation, but that there is not a soul. Again, I don't want to just keep repeating because this has all come up before. So maybe just go back and read or listen to earlier episodes, about this word soul is really kind of more of a Judeo-Christian word. And it's not that you can't be that and also be a Buddhist, but, again, I've cautioned, please do not presume that Buddhism is looking at reality through that same valiance. It's not. It's quite different from that. Becoming through sensual becoming. I smell chocolate cake. I crave the chocolate cake. I eat the chocolate cake. I eat too much chocolate cake in my case because I'm just completely addicted to sugar. And now I don't feel so great, and that produces an old record in my mind. There's the mental contraption happening, right? Of why did you do that? What's right? So all of this is starting from somewhere, right? It's starting from somewhere, from the smell. But maybe it would have come from something else, and then again, so I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but this is turtles all the way down in terms of how subtle and nuanced this can go. So form becoming. So here, and I'm using robot again to help me really understand this. And robot is saying form becoming in Pali is rupa bhava, and explaining that the loose translation, according to robot, is fine material form. Rupa jhana absorptions, where the coarse senses are subdued but perception of form remains. And this is actually really the first experience you'll have with any real meditation practice. When you start to train the mind, is, as you continue to practice training the mind in this way, then you start to drop below what here, and I've heard this word used before. It's interesting that robot used this word, coarse, mundane, and anyway. So you start to drop kind of below these strictly dependent upon sense media experiences. But we can also become quite attached to that. And, I would imagine that probably nuns and monks everywhere in the Buddhist tradition are warned about becoming attached to, and again, this is where Buddhism is quite different from Hinduism. I'm guessing, based on what I know about Hinduism, but maybe perhaps I'm wrong here. I'm very open to being wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Where we're not seeking those experiences and pursuing them, just trying to feel good all the time. I realize that is a view, a way of perceiving the world. I'm just saying that's not what Buddhism is. That's all. Yeah. Again, it's just a path. If it doesn't make sense for you in your life, or be something that you can, resonates, then yeah, it's probably just not for you. And there's so much out there, that one can look to find and make meaning, as to feel some semblance of contentment / happiness in life, and hopefully to be a better civilian, and guardian of this ball and, the larger whatever this is experience that we're all having. So yeah, there's that. And then the formless. Yeah. Robot here. And I also know from remembering that, again, you'll hear the word subtle a lot in Buddhism. So this is much subtler than form. This idea of formlessness, formless. And I've mentioned before that this is something that you can access, that I have accessed. I don't consider myself to be special. You can access this. It is possible to access this through practice. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Everybody's got an opinion about stuff, right? I have experienced it. I've also experienced it through maybe like day 6 or 7, of a really hardcore retreat, no eye contact, no talking, nothing, 9 hours a day of meditation. So it's available, it's accessible. And everything kind of drops away. And I'm just saying that, yes, this idea of formlessness, you can experience it directly. I have experienced it directly. It is available. It is available, but it's still becoming, it's still something that we are experiencing. I, the me and the my is experiencing. And from a Buddhist view, it's just part of the same dance. And I shouldn't say just as if it's trivial. It's not trivial, but it is part of the same dance. And so in Buddhism, the Buddha would say, okay, yeah, cool. Look what you did. And, so it's a real kind of the middle way. We're not chasing after here. Okay. When a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns clinging, the origination of clinging, the cessation of clinging, and the way of practice leading to the cessation of clinging, then he is a person of right view who has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is clinging? What is the origination of clinging? What is the cessation of clinging? What is the way of practice leading to the cessation of clinging? There are these 4 clingings: sensuality clinging, view clinging, habit and practice clinging, and self-doctrine clinging. This is called clinging. From the origination of craving comes the origination of clinging. From the cessation of craving comes the cessation of clinging. And the way of practice leading to the cessation of clinging is just this very Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And I think I'll keep going, and like I did last time, and just read a couple of these together and then unpack them together. So mentions that, we get to clinging via craving. And so what is craving? The next section is craving. When a disciple of the Noble Ones discerns craving, the origination of craving, the cessation of craving, and the way of practice leading to the cessation of craving, then he is a person of right view who has arrived at this true Dhamma. And what is craving? What is the origination of craving? What is the cessation of craving? What is the way of practice leading to the cessation of craving? There are these 6 cravings: craving for forms, craving for sounds, craving for smells, craving for tastes, craving for tactile sensations, craving for ideas. This is called craving. From the origination of feeling comes the origination of craving. From the cessation of feeling comes the cessation of craving. And the way of practice leading to the cessation of craving is just this very Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So I think I'm going to leave it here for this week. And I know that we've already talked about both of these ideas, kind of naturally happened just in talking about other aspects in this sutta here. So the 4 clingings, well, we talked about sensuality clinging to the sensory experience, view clinging, our views, habit and practice clinging. So clinging to those very things that we claim to be using to help us drop clinging. So any even meditation itself can become clinging. It can become a part of the trap. It's quite subtle how easily we can become trapped. Clinging to our habits and practices can be part of the trap of clinging. And self-doctrine clinging to one's own. And so self-doctrine clinging is the sense of the self. And I love that idea, self-doctrine, doctrine. In other words, it's a belief in this idea of self. And again, I realize the nuance of all of this. It's come up in previous episodes that, yes, of course, we need a sense of self to survive in the world. We need, I love that saying, I don't even know who first said it, but, boundaries are for us, not for others. That's why I appreciate that we need a sense of autonomy. We need a sense of self, but I'm talking about to my understanding, Buddhist psychology suggests that we also need to understand that it's a contraption. It's devised by mind via patterns, via conditioning, via mind and habituation. So it's impermanent. So self-doctrine, clinging to the sense of self, the I, me, my. This is called clinging. And then craving. Yeah, we've already really talked about this, so I think I'll just leave it right here. I guess I got ahead of myself there a little bit. But we will pick it up where we left off at the top of page 233 with feeling next time. And I am guessing, I'm going to do a quick little look here. I am guessing that there are probably 2 more episodes, and then we will be done with right view and moving on to right resolve, if you can believe that. So there you go. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you're listening, I appreciate it. I appreciate the support and the listenership. And I hope you got something out of this and it was useful for you. And I also hope that you're taking good care wherever you are. And yeah, see you later. Bye.